and spell your name and provide your address for the record.
Verle Tate. It's V as in Victor, E-R-L-E, T as in Tom, T-A-T-E, 1908 Sandy Beach Road, Clarion, Iowa, 50525.
And Mr. Tate, what county is this parcel in?
Wright.
Wright County. And this is the parcel that you see on the KMZ map, correct?
Yes.
Do you have anything else that you call this parcel by a different name or anything?
No, just the field that's associated with this farm, and that's no other name.
Okay, sounds good. Can you please describe the current use of your property and any plans you maybe would have for it in the future?
It's row crop corn and soybeans, and that's what it will be in the future also.
Can you give us a general description of your property? Anything you'd like to point out at this point in time?
Maybe a little history. I'm an Iowa State mechanical engineer. I worked in the petrochemical industry in Texas and Oklahoma for 11 years, then returned to Iowa to engage in farming. I can't describe my feelings of frustration at the idea that control of my land might be taken from me and given to a for-profit company. My great-grandfather came to Wright County as a teenager and homesteaded land. Over the next several years, he acquired additional parcels, these two, and an additional parcel which belongs to my sister, who died in the past year, and her husband, which is just north of this parcel, located in the same section, were part of that land. My great-grandfather farmed this land. My grandfather farmed it. My father farmed it. I farmed it. My son farms it now. And my grandson is an agronomist and involved in farming. There are no buildings or structures on the property. The closest buildings that can be seen in the lower left-hand corner, and my son and his wife live there. They're about 800 feet from the proposed route of the CO2 pipeline, and other buildings there are our shop, grain bins, machine storage, and cattle sheds. The only underground installations is the drainage systems. All three of these parcels that I've described, the two here and the one that belonged to my sister and her husband, are pattern tiled, which means there's a tile about every 60 feet. It's impossible to repair damaged tile to as installed specifications. Drainage tile is installed with precision GPS controlled equipment, which allows installation at a very accurate grade, oftentimes as little as 0.1% grade, which is about an inch of fall per 100 feet. One or two things happens when during tile repair. Either the ground settles in the area of repair, or the dirt in the area of repair is left too high. If the ground under the tile settles, a low spot is created in the tile where silting then occurs. If the ground under the repair is left too high, a high spot in the tile causes silting upstream of the repair. Either situation results in reduced capacity of the drainage system. Next to the investment in land, investment in tile and drainage is the next most costly and important investment in crop production. Some will directly impact the drainage on 220 parcels in Wright County, Iowa, at around $30,000 the value of tile on each of those parcels. That's $6.6 million worth of tile systems that will be directly disturbed by Summit during the installation of the pipeline. These tiling systems have a life of at least 100 years. Summit is asking Wright County farmers to risk $6.6 million worth of drainage systems in hopes that the tile repairs are 100% perfect. If the repairs leave the drainage system at 90% effective, that's a damage Wright County farmers will bear for many years in the future. As an example of how we protect our pattern tiled fields, we used to dig a hole next to a rock that we found in our fields and bury them right there. But now we never dig in our pattern tile fields. There are no above ground facilities, and the only stream or body of water that is very close is, you can see the meandering stream that goes along the west side of that and goes on up through to the north. The Boone River is about a quarter of a mile to the south that empties into. That'd be about 300 feet from where the proposed route is. And no timber or forest on the land, and no third-party easements. No other condition that I need to point out, I don't think so. Any other specific concerns that I may have, any other recommendations to address? I'm concerned that my son and daughter-in-law live in the kill zone if there's a pipeline leak or rupture. Since the CO2 is heavier than air, if there were a leak or line rupture such as happened in February of 2020 in Sartassia, Mississippi, the CO2 would tend to pool in the lower elevation area between where the pipeline runs and their house, bringing the CO2 to within 100 feet or closer to their house, and that lower area would be where the meandering stream runs through. On alternative routes, my first knowledge of plans for a CO2 pipeline was a letter from Summit dated August 20th, 2021. In the next month or so, I received paperwork showing the pipeline routed through our land. I contacted Summit's project director, Eric Schonovec, just before Thanksgiving 2021, asking him to consider changing the pipeline route to avoid our property. He said he didn't think there was much he could do, but he would look at the situation and get back to me. I didn't hear anything from him, and I contacted him again at the end of March 2022, and I really didn't feel that he took my request very seriously. And at the time I was thinking across the road to the east is pasture ground where crops and drainage would not be affected. However, as I continued to consider it, I decided it really wouldn't be right for me to push my problem off onto a neighbor. Therefore, I don't think there is a good route through that area for the pipeline. And other concerns that I have, having the pipeline routed through our farm will permanently devalue our property, since the easement will be part of the farm ownership forever. The pipeline operates at 80 to 90 degrees Fahrenheit, which will warm the ground above it, causing the soil above it to be more dry than the soil in the rest of the field, negatively impacting the ability of the soil above the pipeline to produce crops, especially during dry spells. The warmer pipeline temperatures will also prevent the ground from freezing during winter, and we depend on ground freezing to reduce compaction. The ability of the ground above the pipeline to grow crops will be negatively impacted for as long as the pipeline operates. The talked about in the agreement they wanted to draw up that they would help with the damages on crops for 3 years, but it'll be an ongoing damage for as long as that pipeline is in operation. The easement agreement someone wants us to sign is a fairly open-ended agreement. I would like to know if any of the pipeline or associated equipment will be above ground. I would like any pertinent facilities to be identified and specified. I don't want to farm around above ground pertinent facilities. We have custom applications of fertilizer and chemicals, and we hire some machine operators. We found if we have an intake in the field, for instance, sometime or another, it will be hit with equipment. We don't want anything in our field associated with a pipeline that can be hit with equipment as we perform our regular farming operations. Both the United States Constitution and the Iowa Constitution prohibit the taking of private property for the benefit of another private individual. The investors in Summit are private parties. Using eminent domain for this project would be similar to your neighbor coming to your house and saying they want to add on to your house, their house, and to do so, they're going to come across a property line and tear 10 feet from the side of your house to give them the room they need, and you have no recourse. And here's $100 for your inconvenience. Please consider how you would feel if it were your property rights being trampled. I hope you can feel the pain and violation we as property owners feel. My analogy is poor because houses simply do not have the same importance to homeowners as a farm has to a farmer. I've lived in several houses in my lifetime. Moving from house to house is rather simple. There's usually very little sweat equity involved. Houses come and go, but farmland involves environmental stewardship, building soil fertility, and personally performing cropping activities that becomes a passion and makes you protective of the property. I haven't been performing these activities and paying the taxes on this property for most of my lifetime to have Summit desecrate the soil for a politically driven tax credit program which everyone in this room will help pay for through their taxes. Questions?
Well, you pretty much answered all of them. I think the only question I have remaining that's not on my list, but you did receive a copy of an easement proposal, correct?
Several times.
And did you ever make any counter proposals?
No, when the agents talked to me, the first problem we encountered was the drainage. I asked them early on, what are you going to do about my drainage? And the first fella, he's got a funny look on his face, and he said, drainage. And so I knew that they didn't understand what drainage was. So from then on, we had some discussion about the drainage, and basically their answer was, we've got a contractor that'll come in and we'll repair that drainage to as good a condition as it was before we got here. And I don't believe that's possible. And once they disrupt that drainage system on these pieces of property, it's hard to find where the problem is. I'll deal with it for the rest of my lifetime and my son's lifetime, trying to convince Summit that there's a problem and where it is, and I can understand that how that conversation would go, and I don't believe that there's a possibility they can go across that field and cut those pipelines and repair them to as good as they were before they got there. There'll be errors and flaws, and they'll be difficult to detect. In all likelihood, it'll end up as a reduction in efficiency of the total drainage system for that property. It might be 10%, might be 30%. Hard to prove, hard to identify what the problem is. So drainage is what stopped us from getting any further in the discussions. I had a good working relationship with the three people that came out and talked to me. They're always polite and reasonable, I thought, but drainage was the problem that I ran into that I couldn't get past.
And you said your pattern tile is every 60 feet?
About 60 feet, yeah.
And then do you have tile maps?
Yes, I do, yeah.
And then I don't need to see them right now. I just wondered if you did have, because I know some folks have said they have them and some say they don't.
If you want to enter them, I've got them. If you don't, that's fine.
And that would be up to you if you wanted to enter them as an exhibit.
I've got them. You just well enter them in, and you'll have them in if you need them for later on.
And if I have an IUB staffer that would be willing to grab those, we'll get copies made and distributed to the parties.
Yeah.
And then
I don't go back.
And then at a later time, Ms. Grunhagen will ask if you want to enter those as an exhibit, and we'll move forward on that.
Okay.
I appreciate the reminders. What else? I had something else I was going to ask you. Did you ever have any conversations about boring under the tile with those agents?
No, we never really talked about boring. The Boone River is just south here, and I know they have to bore under that. So I know that they do some boring. I think at one time I asked them about boring that distance, and they didn't give me any encouragement that they would be willing to do that. So if we did, it was minimal anyway if we talked about boring.
And do you recall the diameter of pipe in this project in your parcel?
Well, the easement thing talks up to 24-inch. I think it was something like 16-inch here or something like that. But the way the easement read, as I saw it, that's really not a firm number. That's just a might be number, and so I can't say we know exactly what the diameter of the pipe would be.
Okay. All right, that's all I have for now. Mr. Taylor?
Here we go. Mr. Taylor, I'm Wally Taylor. I represent the Sierra Club. And I wondered, first of all, that stream that's on the southwest boundary of your property, is that a named creek of some sort?
I don't think there's a name to it. If there is a name, I don't recall ever hearing what it was.
But it is a perennial stream. It's got water flowing all the time.
Yes.
Would that stream be at a lower elevation than your property next to it?
Yes, between where the pipeline is and where the buildings are, that's the low point. That'd be the low area in the field and then next to the buildings.
Okay. And I noticed in that southwest portion of your property, there's sort of a triangle that's a little darker color. Do you know what that is or why that's a darker color?
That was a cattle pasture. It isn't anymore, but it was a cattle pasture. My son had cattle out there.
But is that in crops now?
Yes,
Okay. And the larger building down below the southwest portion of your property, that's the cattle barn? The larger building?
that's a machine shed.
Oh,
And
so what's the cattle barn?
the cattle buildings are along the east side of the buildings spot there. Yeah, right in there.
Oh, okay.
Those are cattle buildings.
Okay. And how many head of cattle do you have in there usually?
Well, there's none there right now, but when this picture was taken, there were cattle in there. So that he did have like 50, 55 cows and calves, and a few that he was feeding out. So, but there's no cattle there right now.
You talked a lot about your tiling system, and I think at one point you said you were concerned about problems with tile repair. Can you be a little more specific about what you think those problems are?
Well, in order to make a repair in a tile in a section, and I don't know how long a section they'll cut out of there. It could be 10 feet or something like that. But in order to make that repair perfect, you have to maintain that tile on the same grade that it was laid in originally with GPS equipment, which is very precise. So you don't want a dip in that tile, or you don't want a hump in that tile. A dip occurs when the ground underneath the repair settles. Now they can compact that soil where that repair tile is going to be laid in, but unless it's compacted to the same level as the ground around it, the virgin ground where the tile has been laid, it'll settle. Or if they leave it a hump there, which oftentimes happens, then they hold up water upstream of the flow, and the tile begins to silt in there. So you either got silting upstream because they left too much fill in there, or if you have a dip there, you have silting in right at the point of the repair. Either one reduces the efficiency of your tile.
And as I understand, you were not able to get any satisfactory answers from Summit about the problems with the tile being damaged or repaired?
They have a system to repair tile is probably as good as can be done. It's just the fact that the best that can be done is not going to be satisfactory on a lot of these tile repairs. There's going to be errors, and they're not going to get them laid in there to the same grade and precision that they were installed in originally. And as I mentioned, the tile. Well, in this piece here that's red, we've got about close to $60,000 worth of tile, and I'm just not willing to risk them damaging that drainage system during this process when I don't have any confidence that they can do satisfactory repairs where they cut through it.
I guess my question was, when you were talking with the Senate representatives, why didn't you get any satisfaction from them about the impact to your tile? What did they tell you?
Well, they told me that Summit would repair the tiles where they cut through to as good a condition as they were when they were originally put in by the tiling company that used precision equipment. And I just, as an engineer and looking at this practically, it just doesn't happen that way.
The Boone River, how many feet did you say that was from the pipeline?
No, it's about a quarter of a mile. Well, the pipeline goes under the Boone River. It's just south here a little way. There's the Boone River.
Yeah.
And they'll have to bore under that.
Yeah. But east of your property,
Right.
it looks like there's a bend in the river that comes pretty close to your property.
Right, that's the Boone River again.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and that's, if they were to run the pipe up across that property, the river would be an obstacle to them. I mean, I know they're used to handling obstacles, and I don't think that's a big deal. They can handle a lot of obstacles in running pipelines. And I'm sure they looked across the road and said, "Oh, look at that nice field. Let's just run up through there." But I don't want to push this off on my neighbor. He's got cattle out there part of the year, and so at first I thought, yeah, it'd be better to run it over there. It's pasture land, but I don't really think that's the fair thing to do either.
As the Boone River flows next to your property from north to south,
Right.
about how far is the river itself from the pipeline route?
I would say that's about 600 feet, maybe. It is closest up in where it comes closest to the road there.
Can we have the staff maybe measure that?
We can.
To me.
Yeah, we can.
That's 470 feet. How about that bend that comes even closer up there? 360 feet or so. Okay. And I think the Boone River would be at a lower elevation than your cropland. Is that correct?
Yes.
Is there actually kind of a valley there, perhaps?
Pardon me?
Is there actually kind of a valley there around the river?
Yeah, it's a lower, it's a riverbed there, so the ground does drop off when you get east of the road down to the river.
Yeah. And I think you mentioned your son and daughter-in-law's residence. Where is that?
Well, we live down in Adel, and she passed away in the last year or so, but that I mentioned that ground because that's all part of family ground that have been in our family for generations.
Okay. You said you talked to Eric
Shonovec.
Chovanek about changing the route. Did he give you any response on that at all?
He gave me the impression that this pipeline route was chiseled in stone, that there just was no changing, and or something to that effect. And I got the idea that he really didn't take my question very seriously, that this is the route, just don't worry about it. I don't know, maybe I misread him, but I didn't think that he was very serious about it in his response to my question anyway.
Okay. Did any of the summit representatives mention eminent domain to you as they were discussing the easement?
Eminent domain was mentioned a few times.
In what respect? What was the point?
Well, if you don't sign an easement, we'll probably take this to eminent domain, and then you won't get much for your land.
Okay. how did you feel about that response?
What's that?
How did you feel about that response?
Well, basically, it never was about the money. And so, I guess, if it comes to eminent domain, no, I'm not going to be happy to take less for my land, but the money wasn't the important part in this, in the whole discussion. The farm is family land. It's not for sale. It's a desecration of fine farmland, and it's not for sale at any amount. So it wasn't about the money really. So when they told me, they would take it to eminent domain, you won't get anything for it. Well, sometimes you can be abused, and that's the way it ends up, I guess.
If there were a rupture or a break in the pipeline, where would be the closest emergency personnel that could come in and deal with it?
In Renwick,
And how far is that?
it's about 7 or 8 miles.
Is that a small town with a volunteer?
Right, volunteer fire department, and
Okay. That's all the questions I have. Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Ms. Grunhagen?
Thank you, yeah. Mr. Tate, my name is Chris Grunhagen, and I'm representing the Iowa Farm Bureau Federation in these proceedings. I have a few questions for you after we talk about your hearing exhibit. The two tile maps that you had, the IUB staff make copies of, would you like to have those entered into evidence?
Yes, just as well.
Then you may want to ask Board Member Burns if he will do that for you.
If you would, enter them into.
Yes, we will enter these as Tate hearing exhibit number 1, and that would be the one that has the paperclip photocopied on the front at the top. And then the second one I would enter, or we're going to label as Tate hearing exhibit number 2. Do any of the parties have any objections to that? All right, seeing none, we will enter these hearing exhibits as Tate hearing exhibit 1 and Tate hearing exhibit 2. Thank you.
And so the Tate hearing exhibit 1, which is the one with the paperclip on it, or do you have a copy?
Well, no, but
Did you give yours
just
away?
hold it up, let me see
Okay.
it. Okay, that's this one.
Okay. And the parcel on the left,
Right.
hey, that was Kenan, that is not one of the parcels that
No.
they're looking at, but
No,
it's
that's-
property that you own?
This parcel we're talking about, that's the whole farm, or quarter section, and so it's 2 different fields. That on the left side is not involved with what we're talking about here.
So the field on the right is the one that is
Right,
being requested.
right.
And so with the pattern tile, is your concern more with the tile that is running north-south or the tile that's running, I understand you're concerned about both, but is there more concern about the north-south tile or the east-west running tile?
It doesn't make any difference what direction they're running. If they cut through a tile, it's kind of the same problem with repair. If they cut through a north-south tile, why they're going to do a lot more damage to a tile than the length of the tile to repair. But it's still a repair job. The east-west ones would be just to cut across, be a shorter section to repair. But it's all related to repair.
And then Tate exhibit number 2, is that the northern parcel?
That's the part that my sister and her husband own. That's just north of this one we've been talking about. it's in the same section, but it's north, on the northeast corner of that section, so, but it, again, it shows the tile that's in there, and how most of the tile in that piece of property is gonna be cut.
Because all of the tiles running
Right.
east-west. Okay. Thank you. Could we go ahead and go back to the KMZ aerial? Thank you. So when you are talking about your sister's property, is that the northern half of what's in red, or is it above the red?
Yeah, it's that part there, yeah, they're pointing out now,
So it's the northern parcel.
yeah.
Just wanted to clarify that. Did you submit any comments or objections in the record other than the two that were filed in July?
No, those would be it.
Okay.
No, excuse me. No.
That's it. And I believe your son is your son Travis.
Right,
He also submitted a comment in July.
yes,
Did any of your other family members submit comments to your knowledge?
I think his wife did,
And what's her name?
Stacy.
Anything else?
Probably their two children.
So your grandchildren then are a little bit
Grandchildren.
older?
Yeah, yeah.
And I assume they have the same last name as well. Okay. Is your property enrolled in the federal farm programs?
We're involved with the NRCS and the FSA and all those programs that apply.
Have you enrolled in any cost share, or are these properties enrolled in any cost share programs at all?
No cost sharing, no.
Okay. You have some pretty nice flat property here.
Fairly
Right.
flat, yeah.
With the drainage tile, with the amount of drainage tile that you have, if you didn't discover that some of that drainage tile wasn't repaired properly, say 5-6 years down the road, would you want Summit to be required to still come in and fix that?
Yes.
Do you have any? Are there any areas that are designated wetlands?
No.
And did you get a chance to look at the proposed easement at all?
I have looked at the proposed easement.
Do you have any concerns with that easement? Anything that you want added to that easement?
Well, if it came to actually having an easement agreement, I think there'd be several things that we'd have to work out. That agreement is ambiguous in a lot of ways, and it covers a lot of areas in Summit's favor, which is fine. That's what you'd expect them to do. But if we were going to work on an easement agreement, I think we'd have to work on a lot of details.
So if the pipeline permit is granted, would you want to continue negotiations with them to try to resolve something before you'd go to eminent domain?
I would hope we don't get to that point. I'm just hopeful that we don't get to that point. But if we have to, we'll have to face that and work our way through it. But at this point, I'm not ready to think about it.
If the board were to approve eminent domain as a part of this process, part of that includes that easement language. I don't know if you got mailed that in July.
You know, I don't know which mailing you're referring to. I've had hundreds. Well, maybe that's a stretch, but I've got a file about that thick of stuff that's come from Summit and other people related to this, so I've kind of lost track of the mailings.
You mentioned there were some things that you'd like to see in the easement that weren't there yet. Could you describe what some of those things are?
Well, as I described earlier, things like equipment associated with the pipeline that's not described in the easement. They use the word appurtenance, which can involve a lot of different pieces of equipment. Who knows what all? That would have to be spelled out. Really want to try to avoid having any kind of equipment sticking above ground associated with this pipeline. As I mentioned, if it sticks above ground in the middle of our field, somebody will run into it. So it's just a matter of safety, and I really want to avoid those kind of things. And there's other things too, but on the easement side of it. But those are in particular things that we'd be concerned about.
You mentioned that you believe there's a 16-inch pipe proposed for your property.
As I remember, it's 16. It's supposed to be 16 inch through there, but the easement says it could be 24. Again, that's not described in any specific detail.
Would you like the board to describe it specifically as the 16-inch?
If it came to easement negotiations and talks, we need to know the size of the pipe and the route of the pipe. Even things like they're running this pipe at an angle through the field. It's, we would rather see them run just right straight through. So if we got so many feet on the east side of it, that it'd be a rectangular instead of an odd shape. Things like that. There's just a lot of details we need to talk about.
So would you propose that as an alternate route, just to straighten that up a little bit?
Well, not at this point. I guess that's the least of my worries at this point.
You mentioned that you had talked to Eric Chavonek. I always have trouble.
Chovanec, I believe it is.
Chavonek, thank you. Do you know approximately when it was you talked to him?
Yeah, I talked to him just before Thanksgiving, the first time it was 2021. He was just about to leave to go to Oklahoma to visit his relatives for Thanksgiving, and I didn't think he was very encouraging, but he did say that he'd look into it and he'd get back with me, and I suppose to that it meant if I don't do anything, it'll be forgotten. And to me, it meant I expected to hear something from him. And I didn't hear anything from him. And it got to be toward the end of March, and I called him again and talked to him, and he didn't sound like he was too worried about my concerns, and so that was kind of into that conversation.
When you said in March, would that have been of 22 or 23?
22.
And did you talk to him since then?
No.
Do you have any other concerns with the pipeline going through your property that you haven't mentioned yet today?
Well, I think that, you folks who have listened to everybody else talk have heard a lot of concerns, and I share a lot of those concerns, but I didn't think it's really a good use of everybody's time for me to jump into other areas. So I try to keep it to things that I felt were important and might not have been discussed in very much detail before. So there are other things, but we don't need to get into those today. Other people have covered them.
That's all the questions I have right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kernhagen. And I believe Mr. Williams.
Thank you. Just a couple follow-up questions. Council, who was previously questioning you, asked you about the 5 to 6 year time frame for discovering issues with your tile. Is that a realistic time frame, or could it possibly go for years longer than that, where you wouldn't learn of an issue with a section of tile that had been disrupted?
It could go longer. It doesn't make any difference if it's a year or 10 years. If you find a problem with where a tile is repaired, we know where the source of the problem was. That was the repair. So, to me, if they want to say up until 5 years or 6 years, that really doesn't make much sense. It doesn't. It could be 10 years down the road that a repair will fail. Repairs are not as good as the original was. And so it could be several years down the road. So I don't think that makes sense to limit it to just 5, 6, 7 years, whatever the number was.
With tile replacement, even if the ground was dug up and the tiles were, broken, requiring replacement, and you had the GPS assistance that you had talked about when the tile was originally placed, I get from your testimony that you still run the risk that the tile will not stay where it's put, even if it's measured appropriately using the GPS equipment. Is that accurate?
I think that's accurate, yeah. And first of all, you couldn't get the type of machinery in there to make a repair on a 20-foot piece of repair that they could do any good. They're bigger than that, for one thing. Even if you could, after you disturb that ground underneath where the repair is made, unless you can compact that area to exactly match the virgin soil on either side of it, that soil is going to settle, creating again the slump or the sinking drop in the tile, and then you start a silting process, and that reduces the efficiency of your tile. So even if you lay that in there with precision elevation equipment, unless that ground floor is exactly like the virgin soil on either side of it, you're still not going to get there. So I'm saying it just really can't be done.
And we've heard testimony from others that have come before you and over the course of the last week that had kind of a time range of several years to perhaps never, that compaction could be addressed. I assume you're along that range, but compaction developing under tiling, that just adds another layer to the problem. Is that fair?
Right, it does.
You were also asked a question by previous council about the desire to, if I heard it correctly, the desire to want to continue to negotiate in the event that this board grants the permit. Do you recall a question about that? I'm just curious, from your own personal standpoint, how much leverage do you think you would have in that type of scenario?
Somewhere between 0 and none.
All right, thank you very much. No further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Mr. Tate, just one quick question for you. How deep is your current tile? Do you know?
In general, it runs from 3.5 to 4.5 feet. It can get as deep as 5 feet, but that's unusual.
I just didn't see anything on the maps that talked about depth,
No.
but okay. And I think that is all I have. Board Member Marks, do you have any questions? All right. Well, Mr. Tate, I appreciate the fact that you were able to come in front of us this afternoon and reschedule from this morning, and appreciate your time with us today, and you are excused.
Thank you.